So I hear that you are planning a Disney holiday trip and you just don't know where to start. So don't worry. I have been in this position before and it can be extremely challenging, especially with all of these random Disney terminology jargon thrown at you like a party, magical, genie plus, and rope drop. So my name is Richard and my job is to guide you to the planning process from booking to planning your itinerary. And this episode is episode 1, and it really does bring into the question that you really need to answer before you even start planning, before you start booking anything. Is Disneyland the right holiday for you? So grab your Mickey ears, because this is Richie Mouse Podcast. Hello everyone and welcome to the first ever episode of the Richie Mouse Podcast. My name is Richard and I am going to be your host, and this is going to be just a small podcast series about planning for Disneyland California, and I'm going to go into a bit about why I'm doing this and who I am in a second, but I just want to say hello and welcome. This is episode 1 and I'm going to be focusing today on, is Disneyland the right holiday for you? And that might sound like a very difficult question to answer, and there's a few different factors that need to come into account whenever you're planning your own holiday, and I feel like this is the first step that you take before you book anything, before you purchase any tickets to the parks or purchase any merch. You need to just think about, is this the right holiday? And hopefully by the end of today's podcast, you'll have a yes or no answer. And it's okay if you have either yes or no. If you're in between, you might need to listen back to the podcast again once more, or have a discussion about what the topics were in the podcast to get the best idea. So if you are joining us for the first time, which I think you all will be, my name is Richard. I am a blogger, a Disney blogger, mainly focused in Paris. As you can tell from my lovely accent, I'm from Ireland. So in an Irish tradition, I thought it'd be good to start off the episode by going over, put on the kettle, and you can do this too if you're at home, and make yourself a nice cup of tea. I've got in front of me a Barry's tea, not sponsored, with some oat milk in it, and it is in my Agatha All Along cup, which was created by at Royal Park Designs on Instagram. They were an amazing company that produced Starbucks cups and also Starbucks holders, cup holders, so you can bring them in the parks as well. But this one is a heated cup, or like a hot cup from Starbucks, and it has my name on the front, and then it has in really cool writing Agatha All Along, because I got it right at the time that I was watching WandaVision and I was obsessed, and I'm still obsessed with Agatha, and I think it's just a great show, and that's what my coffee or my tea is in. So if you are in the vicinity of a kettle, pop on the kettle, and we're going to relax and talk a little bit about Disney holidays. So as I was saying as well, I'm Irish, I'm a blogger, but I'm also a teacher, and my blog is Richie Mouse Blog, and it focuses mainly on helping families, especially families with children with intellectual disabilities, and how they can navigate the park. I have been a student support assistant for the last year, and that has allowed me to gain a huge amount of knowledge, and also through my training, I know how to help young people who might find the parks a little bit difficult, and that's kind of where I build up my resources for. So it's social stories, it's a bit about the parks, a bit about the rides, what to expect, building expectations, all of that kind of stuff. But I was chatting to my partner Connor, who might be on the podcast. I'm hopefully going to trick him into joining me for a bit. But I talked a bit about wanting to do a kind of vlog, and I'm just not happy in front of the camera. I didn't really enjoy it, and I just thought about podcasts would be a great way for me to kind of give a bit of feedback on what I've learned and how I navigate the world of Disney, and maybe that can help out some families and some people too. There's a lot that goes into planning a Disney holiday, and I don't think people understand that really until they experience it themselves. And I hopefully be able to give you a bit of information about that. What's really exciting though is that myself and Connor in a month are traveling to Disneyland California. Now, I've been before. I worked in a camp in America and I've been twice. Connor has never been. So if you are planning a Disney holiday to Disneyland California, this is where our podcast is going to be going. But of course, you can listen in if you're going to Disney World or Disneyland Paris, because I feel like those parks as well will work together. Not really sure about Tokyo. I haven't experienced that before, or Hong Kong Disney either, or Shanghai. But hopefully in the future I'll get to experience those ones and I can do more episodes on them as well. And just more reasons for me to travel. But I set the podcast not expecting there to be much of a listenership. It's a great way for me as well to kind of talk about my plans and be excited for my plans without plaguing people about I'm going to Disney, because this is kind of what this episode is going to surround, and how this episode came about is true. People not really understanding why you're going to Disney, and I'm going to explain that in a little bit too. There is a few disclaimers before we start though. Number one, I am not affiliated in any way to Disney, the Disneyland or the Disney company in any shape or form. This is just me talking about their parks, and I give a very honest opinion about my experiences, because I want that to be an honest experience for you. And I just wanted to put that out there first in case anyone was concerned or confused. And secondly, any companies I talk about within the podcast, I have no affiliation with, and if I do, I would let you know. So I'm not sponsored, no advertisements. I will also say that around any brands that I mention, including Barry's Tea. I don't think they're ever going to want to sponsor a Disney podcast, but if they did, I am here. Please give me free tea bags. And the other disclaimer is that I am not a Disney expert. I have experienced Disneyland Paris and Disneyland California. I haven't experienced Walt Disney World was supposed to, but the pandemic stopped our plans. But I do have a really good understanding of it. And one thing I do know is that everyone plans their holidays in different ways. Everyone has different things they want to hit on their bucket list when they're going. But I'm going to give you the best outlook on what I think is a brilliant Disney holiday and how I plan it and how I want to plan things. But just remember that you are your own individual person and your family is very different to my party that I'm bringing. So we're going to have different experiences, different things you want to do. Like, I don't really want to meet a princess, but maybe your family do, and you have to take that into account. So there are kind of some disclaimers to be aware of as we go through this podcast and this podcast series. So without further ado, I think it's time to jump into our topic today, which is Disneyland California the right holiday for you? Let's find out. So the idea for this episode came up when I was talking to a friend, and we were having coffee, and I just said that I was looking forward to my holiday, and she's kind of said, where are you going? And I got very bashful and kind of looked down and was like, oh, I'm going to Disneyland. And they're like, again? You're going to Disneyland again? And I do feel sometimes as a Disney fan, I have to stand up and fight for Disney, and why I'm going for the millionth time. But it got me thinking about, do other people have the same situation too? And is there a way that we can have pre-planned answers on why we want to go to Disney? Today we're going to be focusing mainly on the Disneyland California park. And if you haven't been before, I'm just going to give you just a brief explanation of how Disneyland California kind of looks. And that's the best way for me to explain to you the when we're talking about certain elements and that kind of stuff. So Disneyland California has two parks, and it also has Downtown Disney, which is like a shopping, retail, food and dining experiences are all in that area. And you've also got some hotels around that as well, which I'm not really going to go into detail today on, because I'm going to talk about hotels in the future. But there are hotels in that area as well. Disneyland, in comparison to other places, it's almost like it was built and then the city was built around it. So you're surrounded by restaurants, dining experiences, there's like retail areas, there's a convention center, and there's loads of hotels. So when you go in through Downtown Disney, then on your left, if you're standing in Downtown Disney looking at the left, you're going to see Disneyland Park. and then to your right is DCA, or Disney's California Adventure. So they're really close beside each other, maybe a 5-minute walk, very similar to Disneyland Paris if you've been there before, not very like Walt Disney World, which there's loads of parks, but they're really separated really far away from each other, and you have to get transport to those places unless you want to walk for a very long time. So the first thing you're going to be thinking about is, do I like Disney? And that might sound a bit silly, but the first thing I'd always say is to think about your party. So a party in Disney is a group of people who are traveling together who share the same reservation. So for example, the party going to on the summer holiday for myself and my partner Connor is just myself and Connor. There's 2 of us. We are both Disney fanatics. We both love Disney. We've been listening to Disney, watching Disney movies for a long time. I went to Disney parks a lot when I was a kid, to the Disneyland Paris parks. I'm really grateful that I got that opportunity to do that. And Connor only got to go once when he was younger on a school tour to Disneyland Paris. So I brought him into the world of Disney, and we love everything from the attractions to the pins, the food, the entertainment. There's 2 things we don't like at Disney. The first one is a really long queue because we get very tired in them. And we just have to deal with that. But the second thing is Pirates and Princesses Festival in Disneyland Paris. There's a whole story there. I'll go into it one time. But it's just, they're the 2 things that we dislike about Disney. That's it. We love everything else to do with Disney. So for us, it makes a lot of sense why we've booked a 5-day pass to a park that can be traditionally done in 3 or 4 days, because we want to spend as much time as possible in the Disneyland parks. But people in your party might not like Disney as much as you do, and that's something that is very difficult for you to come to terms with. I have been there before, and I know. I've been to Disneyland California with a group of friends, and I want to do all the rides, and I want to be really proactive, and they want to go shopping for 2 hours, and that's just not what I want to do. So either you decide, okay, this Disney holiday, and you listen to everyone in your party and say, this Disney holiday this holiday is not going to be fully Disney orientated, but I'm going to do 2 days of Disney. And that's all I'm doing at Disneyland California. I'm going to do 1 day in Disneyland Park, 1 day in California Adventure, or even just a 1 day, and I'm going to do just 1 day in Disneyland Park. I'm not going to do DCA. I'm just going to stick to the original. And that will help you decide, okay, as a family member, I don't want to cause any strife in the family. I don't want to cause any problems. It kind of just helps you to realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't be going to Disneyland at all. Maybe I want to do it properly by myself or with a close friend. You might decide to do it that way, or a partner, or with your kids when they're a little bit older. But you need to decide, okay, what do my party want? And that's a big thing for you to work out first, is what do they want, and listening to them. And also it might come down to, okay, you might say, you're all going on a sightseeing tour of Hollywood. I don't want to do that. I'm going to go to Disneyland parks for a day by myself and do everything. And fair play to you if you're a solo traveler. I don't think I could do that. But if you are and you're able to do that, you get on the rides way quicker. You'll be able to not have to follow everyone else's instruction. You won't have to listen to anyone else's opinion. You can just do whatever you want, and that's great. So you have to really listen to your party and work out what they want and what's best for you and for them. The next thing then is, aside from what they want, is what can they physically do? And this is something that I had to come to terms with Connor. And he's amazing at the Disneyland parks. He's really patient. He understands what I'm doing, and I have a plan, and we have to kind of follow the plan because I spent so many hours planning it. And he is more the level-headed person, like, hey, that didn't work out, let's go do this, or let's try something else. And he kind of keeps me in check as well whenever I'm getting to the point of, this is not a fun holiday anymore, this is just us walking around doing attractions, we need to calm down. So he's quite good at that, but he gets really excited around the parks as well. It was our first trip to Disneyland Paris, and we just pushed the first day. We flew in, we landed, we dropped our bags in our hotel, jumped on the first bus we get back to the parks, ran into the parks, and then spent maybe 6 hours running. Like, not walking. I know you're supposed to walk Disney. But like speed walking to everything, not taking breaks, not taking snap breaks, not watching a parade, not sitting down. We just kept going. Connor was kind of complaining as well towards the end, last hour, being like, my feet are so tired, like I'm really tired. And we kind of just called it a night then and went home. It was only when he took off his shoes and we realised that his feet had swollen to 3 times their normal size that I realised that we had overdone it. So think about your party, okay? You've got a party of 4 people, 2 kids, 2 adults. That would be kind of that's a generalization now, but that's just like, say, an average party. There's 2 adults, 2 kids. How old are the kids? Are they going to be able to withstand the crazy heat that could be in California? Do you think they'll be able to enjoy their time there? Are you going to be able to enjoy whenever they're crying a lot? Do you have a plan in place for that? Do you want to push a pram around for the entire holiday? Is that going to be a great way to store things? But also it's a bit clunky, and then when you're trying to watch parades, and if you see a character, you can't really just bulldoze people over with your pram. So maybe that's not maybe that might not be the best idea for you. Do you think maybe you could do morning times or evening times? Can you allow yourself to have that 3-hour break in the middle of the day to go back to your hotel and relax and then come back in? Do you think they might struggle with certain elements of the Disneyland park? Is there ways that you could navigate that? Especially in terms of accessibility and older people as well. Like, you need to think about as well, are they going to have a great time? Are you going to have a great time when they're complaining? And that can be difficult. And that's why I'm being quite honest in this podcast, this episode, is you need to really think about these things before you book your trip, because you don't want to be booking something and then realizing, oh no, like Jenny can't stand the heat past 11 o'clock, needs to go to the pool. And then you're losing 6 hours. And then you get back at 6 o'clock. Is it worth it? So you need to think about those things as well. For us, myself and Connor, because we're going to California, we're going in August, and we're 2 Irish men, and it is very hot in America, is what we've learned. So we've really had to think about how we can plan for that. So we've thought about cooling towels, our Beyonce fans, which are small handheld fans. We've thought about taking a break. We're going to stop at 2 o'clock maybe, or 1 o'clock, go back to the hotel, come back around 5, 6 o'clock, depending, and spend the rest of our evening there, because the park's going to be open from 8 till midnight when we're in California. So that's the main Disneyland park, and then 8 to 10 in Disney California Adventure, I believe. So we're going to plan our trip around that and just be really careful of that. And then we might decide, okay, it's 2 o'clock. We want to keep going. We want to go and explore. We might go and sit down in a restaurant with aircon for an hour and then go back into the parks. We might see something or book an experience which is going to be inside. That's the kind of thing that you should be thinking about as well. Okay, my third thing. So we've covered the party, what they want to do, what they can do. There's other things as well that come into play here. The nostalgia factor of Disneyland California will set Disneyland California aside from any other park that you can go to. What really makes this park special is that this is one of the ones that Walt Disney was actively involved in. So it opened in 1955, and it's the only Disneyland park that was designed by Walt Disney, and he came up with the concept after visiting some amusement parks with his daughters. You can actually go see it, the bench that he sat on, and you can see the carousel that was kind of based off where Disney got the idea from. Or where Walt got the idea from, if I'm on speaking terms with Walt Disney and first names. That's one thing I always ask, is everyone always goes, oh, this is Walt, this is Walt, this is Walt. Is there somewhere Walt Disney said you can call me Walt? Because I feel that's very informal. Maybe that's just an Irish thing where we just call people by their last name, if, like, Mr. Disney. I've never heard someone say Mr. Disney. Have you heard someone say Mr. Disney? If you have, let me know. But it's got that nostalgic feel, and it's something you cannot explain on a podcast. You can explain it in a video, and I've watched vlogs where I've seen people get emotional, and it's the music, and it's always the up music. And you can just hear the music, and you can smell the popcorn and the corn dogs, and you've got the light on above the fire station, which shows that Walt is always there. So the light above the fire station in Disneyland California, the park, is to do with Walt would usually have like a light on in the room of the fire station. That's where he used to stay when he was helping build Disney, and after that as well. And they have a light permanently lit there because Walt is always there, is the idea. Now, if you watch any of the Disney Plus documentary series that are on the Imagineering story, which is on Disney Plus, there's some great moments that you can see. Like, this park was not ready to be opened when it opened. Like, people's heels are going in through the tarmac, or the, I can't remember the word that's used in American in English, but the American word for it's I can't remember the word of it. Anyway, it's what you walk on, the road. People's heels are going into it. So that has that element too of kind of a little bit unfinished. It's very small compared to, say, Walt Disney World, which is quite big. The castle, I was just watching a piece about the castle and how Walt wanted it much bigger and they couldn't afford it, so they make it really small, but use forced perspective to make it look bigger, but it doesn't look as big as it should. And then, like, look at Disneyland Paris. That castle is massive, the Sleeping Beauty castle. It's incredible. And that's kind of what they wanted, but they can't really change it anymore. So there's a huge amount of nostalgia between even cast members working there. They know they're working in the original one, and if they have any love for Disney, they you can kind of tell that they're very proud of their park. California Adventure is a very different park, and there's not much nostalgia there. A lot of the stuff that they would have had before is gone. It wasn't a success when it first opened. Now it's a very cool park. I really love DCA and I can't wait to experience it again. But you've got that real nostalgic element. So if you have any kind of nostalgia towards Disney and even the movies, you've got like Snow White's Enchanted Wish, which is the new Snow White ride. It was Scary Adventures, it's now changed. You've got all that Fantasyland rides. Mr. Toad, which is a very famous ride. I enjoy going on it, but I'm very confused every time I get off, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who's listening, so I'm going to leave it at that. But like, you've got Small World, there's a lot of the rides with their first iterations as well, so you've got a huge amount of nostalgia there. And if you are someone who is quite nostalgic, that's great. But if you're not, you might find it difficult to understand what the hype is about. And I find showing people some vlogs or some, and I'm going to name some creators. This is something I want to do on my podcast, is name certain people. And I've got a spotlight for one creator at the end of this podcast episode, which I'm going to talk about later on. But say Review Time, they're brilliant. They have a podcast as well. If you haven't listened to their podcast, they're fantastic. But they have really good videos about say creating Disneyland and why Disneyland was created, and they do reviews on it, but also the failure of DCA, and I think being aware as well of how DCA didn't really work out. Their episode on DCA 2001 walking tour, it's just a brilliant podcast to listen to, because you can hear all the reasons why the park didn't work, and then you can appreciate the park even more. You can also say look at Defunctland. They do really good videos on YouTube about Disney and why things are the way they are and how they work. And I also love Provost Pass is the creator's name, or is the YouTube channel, and they have great videos on hidden attractions within the park, and they kind of show like old attractions that have now been covered up, and you can kind of go and you can see those piece of evidence from the past. So that gives a huge amount of nostalgia as well to the park. But if you don't have that nostalgia and you don't really enjoy it, it can be a little bit difficult to see what the hype is about. It's just making sure that your person that you're with or your party are aware of the reasons why this is a very special park and why people feel a certain way towards this park, and why when things change, they're not really happy things are changing. But as Walt said, that this will never be a finished park. It'll always continue to grow. So they're the kind of things that you can show people to help them out. And of course, the Imagineering story on Disney is a great watch. It's really well made, and it also is very funny. I think it's great. And you get to hear from Imagineers about why certain things were made and how it began. And the final thing I think you need to think about is money. Disneyland, and it's funny because everyone always goes, that's the first thing everyone jumps to, is like, it's so expensive. It is really expensive for a holiday. You could do multiple holidays in one Disney trip. But there is something magical about Disney, and I hope that maybe in the future podcast, I can talk a little bit more about the magic and how special it is. So you've got cast members. That's what Disney call their staff, is cast members, because they are there to play a part in creating this experience for you. People who work in shops, the people who work on security, the people who work on the rides, they are so lovely. And you get such a great warm welcome from them, and you feel super excited to be there. Now, I know with COVID-19 and staff shortages, it has become more difficult for those cast members. So being kind to them also helps. But there is a whole experience there. And it's just something to think about in terms of money. It doesn't mean that if you don't have a lot of money, you can't go. But just being aware of setting expectations for yourself. You won't be able to go and do everything that you want to do in terms of food, in terms of snacks, which California is really known for, the parks are known for, and experiences. For example, making a lightsaber. You might not be able to afford that, and instead you might buy food for the week that you're there. So you have to just really think about budgeting, and is this the right time for you to go, and is it just going to continue to get more expensive, and should I buy Disney Genie Plus or not, which we'll do a whole episode on. I want to experience it first before I give any advice on that, but you have to think about those things too. And how can I best travel to the parks? Is this the right time to go, and will I get the full experience? And the answer is no. Perhaps looking at, okay, is there other things that we're doing? So, for example, myself and Connor, we are not able to afford eating every day for every meal in the parks. And then we made a decision ages ago that we weren't going to do a lightsaber. Now, we're considering doing the lightsaber. But for the majority, we're thinking, okay, we're going to eat in the local area. We're going to go and try and eat in American chains that we don't have in Ireland. So In-N-Out was one that was mentioned. Denny's, IHOP. We're hoping to try those things just to get an idea what they taste like. Dunkin' Donuts. And of course, lots of Starbucks, which we have in Ireland. But I just want to drink lots of coffee. But rather than doing that all in the park, we're going to do it in the outside area. And although it'd still be a little bit expensive because it's surrounding one of the biggest tourist attractions in California, it'll be a lot cheaper than eating in all the restaurants. Now, that's not saying we don't have reservations for certain things that we really want to do. For example, we've got a reservation for Lamplight Lounge. That was really close. Lamplight Lounge, which is in Pixar Pier. That's going to be our engagement dinner. Myself and Connor got engaged in September, and this is kind of our celebratory trip, which we've waited a year for. We're going to also in Cafe Orleans. We're eating in the Plaza Inn. We're doing a mini breakfast. We're eating in Olga's Cantina, which I just secured a booking for. And there's a few other things that we have booked as well. We've got like the Hungry Bear restaurant for the Fantasmic show, the on-the-go experience, because I want to see how that works. And there's one day we don't have any food booked in the parks, and that's going to be the day that we're going to leave the parks and go get something different and try something new and try and experience other parts outside the actual park itself. But that's our decision that we've made, because we've looked at the finances and said, look, we're spending so much money to get there that we need to kind of also be aware that we want to save money for merch and for snacks. So we want to try that we see around the parks, and also gives a bit more flexibility in the parks. If we're hungry, you might get a corn dog or a turkey leg or something to feel really in the Disney California experience. After doing this podcast today, I think there's a lot that I actually could cover in the future that I think would be really interesting, especially talking about food and dining, if that's something that interests people, or attractions and how we plan that. But the next couple of episodes I'm going to explain is we're going to talk about hotels in our next episode. And I'm going to give as well an episode dedicated to our actual trip and what we have planned. I'm going to go through as much of it as possible that I can explain. We're also going to talk about food and dining then, booking reservations, Genie Plus, and then we come back after our holiday. We're going to do an episode of a recap of what happened and how we felt on it, and hopefully give some more tips on that. So I think I've pretty much come to the end of my first podcast, which is great because I've done it all pretty much in one take, which is being a bit stressful. There's one thing I want to shout out, a content creator, and that's Karen B. So Karen B is a YouTuber on YouTube. Why did I say on YouTube? And she is from Ireland. She currently lives in the UK, and she does some really great Disney California vlogs, and I've been watching them to try and get myself a bit more experience, kind of understanding how the park works and any tips that she has. I watched her series where she was there just around the Christmas time, and I also watched the one then where she's with Ellen Door Dreaming, who are another content creator that give their own shout out at another point in the podcast series. But Karen B is just fantastic at capturing what is happening, also giving some really honest reviews, but also has a really infectious personality, and I think that she just is made for vlogging, and I'm really glad that she's currently putting up her Walt Disney World vlogs, which I'm going to watch. I'm going to download a few of them and watch them, maybe the night before I go to Disney, or on the plane is the plan, or somehow watch them on the plane. I don't think you can download off YouTube. I'm going to save them to watch them on the plane to get myself really excited for Disney. So, Karen B, I'm going to tag you on Instagram, let you know that you're mentioned in this podcast. But if you haven't had a chance to do that, you can go over and find Karen B on YouTube. So, that is it from the Irish podcaster, first timer. I have officially completed, and it's nearly 30 minutes long, and that's pretty good. Thank you so much for listening to this first podcast. I hope that it was some help. We kind of covered why Disney California might be the holiday for you, and we looked mainly at finances, looked at what the party want, what the party can do, and the nostalgic factor to Disneyland California. So that's all from now. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you real soon.